Excuse me, do you know why we pulled you over today? Exactly, it's because you're not subscribed. So you better fix that right now, or we're gonna have to take you in! We're going to talk about it, let's get into it. This is the, article from Mac Rumors on the videos and reviews, or whatever you want to call it, first impressions, hands-ons of these MacBooks. And, there are some videos. This one is from The Verge, right? And I'm not sure which one we're going to pick. We have a lot of choice. So we also have iJustine if you guys want to. I don't want to watch them all on stream, but there are, I feel like there's some interest for a little bit of a deep dive into what is going on with these computers, and let's just discuss one of these videos, right? So let me know which one you guys want to see. Let me know which one's review. I see trigger warning The Verge. I'm not sure what people have against The Verge here, but if it's a trigger warning for you guys, then we should move on. Don't want to get into drama per se. To be honest, I know. So the safe bet is always Rene Ritchie, right? So let's just do Rene Ritchie. He's the second one here on the list. I don't feel like they did this in any particular order, but just... Oh, sorry, Rene. I have to interrupt you there, because there is still music going on. So I'm gonna shut down the music, give you the stage, and I'm going to have some lazy content right here while I eat my pizza, right, ladies and gentlemen. I feel like it's very important that I finish my pizza, otherwise I'm gonna be hangry. And when I'm hangry, stuff goes bad. Anyways, let's just talk about the MacBook Pro, right? The MacBook Pro. It's very important. It's a very important video. Everyone, pay attention. Rene Ritchie.
Down Apple's brand new M1 Max 14-inch MacBook Pro. That's 8 performance cores, 2 efficiency cores, 32 graphics cores, 64 gigs of unified memory, and 2 terabytes of ultra-fast SSD. Oh yeah, I'm Rene Ritchie. Thanks to CuriosityStream with Nebula for sponsoring. Now let's do this. So I loaded up my review unit with the 200 plus gig, close to 18-minute iPhone 13 review video locally onto the SSD, but also last year's 2-port M1 MacBook Pro and 10th generation 13-inch MacBook Pro, and my current main, the 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro, and all on battery as well. I charged them to 100% and then unplugged them all for the remainder of this render. For H.264, for the Intel 13-inch i5, 27 minutes, 59 seconds. For the Intel 16-inch i9, 23 minutes, 18 seconds. For the M1, 11 minutes, 25 seconds. For the M1 Max, 6 minutes, 39 seconds.
It's literally insane
39.
That these numbers... This is literally insane. Do you see this jump, fam? I literally only now noticed that... this is obviously supposed to be the 14-inch, right? Let's not... Okay. I literally just noticed that. I watched this video already. So just in interest of full disclosure, I watched this video already. Apparently I was so excited to see the rest of the information. Always when you watch a video the second time, you see this. So you see shit like this, right? Obviously, again, these creators are doing so many tech videos, especially in Techtober. So this probably slipped in. I completely understand that. Anyways, what I wanted to focus on was these numbers, fam. Look at this. It's only going to get worse, but I just want to show you the difference already. It's absolutely insane if you ask me. Anyways, let's just keep going.
Minutes, 3 seconds for the Intel 13-inch i5, 27 minutes, 53 seconds for the Intel 16-inch i9, 13 minutes, 11 seconds for the M1, and a jaw-dropping 2 minutes, 54 seconds for the M1 Max.
I'm just saying. I told you it was going to get worse, and it did get worse. Literally, if you look at this score, now obviously this is an Intel Core i5, right? So let's just, this is something that you would mostly compare to maybe an M1, if you want to, right? Because that is the same, let's say, price category of laptops. You obviously have the i3, You have the mobile chips before that, but the i3 is not really something that people take seriously. It's mostly the i5. So for general office work and, let's say, Microsoft Office, Microsoft Excel, web browsing, emails, people would use an i5. That is just standard. You have these i5. How do I call these things? The Core i5 V Pro. That's how they call them. Right? That is the lineup for the business. Now, obviously, Apple has the entry-level 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro, which is something that I would compare to that same audience, right? People that would use it for web browsing, maybe a light touch on editing, whatever you want to do. And you already see the difference, fam. Look at this. You see this? Now, the Intel i9 is something that you would compare the audience to with the M1 Max. And if you see the difference, that is absolutely insane. It's insane. It's just not really, oh, we're just going to compare this with the other. No, there's no comparison. There's an entire digit missing. Like, that's not a comparison. That's madness. That's a slaughter, fam. It's insane.
When it comes to battery life, just running those renders took the Intel 13-inch i5 down to 22% battery life. It took the Intel 16-inch i9 down to 25% battery life. It took the M1 down to 80% battery life. And it took...
Dead. That is insane. That is insane. I've never seen that. If you can show me a difference like that, let's say between AMD and Intel, there is none. There is none. Or at least not this big, right? So I know that AMD chips are a little bit more efficient than Intel chips, but it's not this massive. It's not this massive. And obviously, Rene Ritchie is going to get into this as well. This is sustained performance even if you remove the charger. That is insane. There is no x86 laptop that can do that. It's insane.
M1 Max down to, can you even call it down? 90% battery life. This is where I watched Intel die parappa, because the difference between the M1 and Intel is just night and day, or then and now. And it's not even a fair fight, because H.264 is being given a boost on Intel by Apple's T2 chip, which is basically an A10 chip with media accelerators.
Imagine, bruv. Imagine that you're even getting help by your competitor to do better. You're still fucking up. That's absolutely mental.
4 generations behind the M1. ProRes, which is entirely CPU bound on Intel, is handled by 2 new dedicated media blocks on the M1 Max. And that shows a much bigger difference, even compared to M1, which doesn't have the ProRes accelerators. Also, the extra GPU cores, which are pitching in to speed up things like all the effects that I applied to those clips. Now, yes, this is all about me because this is what I do, but if there are any other workloads you want me to run, like WebKit compiles or 3D tests or Logic, whatever, just leave a comment right below the like
gaming
button, and I'll either get to them or find them for you as fast as is inhumanly possible. But also, I can already tell this is going to be absolutely transformative, and not just because the render time is faster, though yes, that, but rendering is only also just a small part of my day. Even multiple renders. The even more important part to me is finally living a life without beach balls, without freezes, not a few minutes out of every day.
Without a charger, fam. Do you know how long these things can run? And then we're talking about literally 21 hours of flipping video playback. Insane. Absolutely insane.
But a few seconds out of every minute, every time I adjust a clip or change an effect or move a layer, it costs me time and causes me frustration. And that's all just gone. Not just for Final Cut either, but opening Safari or tabs, switching to VIP or searching in Mail, opening and closing apps, waiting for the Finder to populate, doing everything I do all day, every day, just everything with instant responsiveness and way less heat, because the M1 MacBook Pro was dead silent the whole entire time I did these tests. And while the M1 Max fans kicked up audibly and pretty quickly, They weren't helicarriers like the Intel models are, and while the M1 Max got warm, it didn't get too hot to comfortably touch for more than a few seconds like the Intel models did, and the fans shut off and the temperature dropped almost immediately after the rendering was done, where the Intel models just kept spinning and radiating for long time afterwards. Now
obviously, sorry, I know I'm pausing a lot. I just have a lot to say. I completely agree with what Rene Ritchie is saying. Obviously, we are comparing it now with another MacBook, like a previous MacBook, obviously an older Intel chip, although the performance of these new Intel chips is not too much better. But I do have to acknowledge is that Apple always had this strong urge to make this device as thin as possible, and that is just not happening with x86, especially not with the chips that were happening back then. I feel like AMD's chips are a little bit better with that right now. Still, it's still x86. It still runs way too hot, especially in a device that thin. So there's obviously another comparison to make with a device that is potentially, let's say, a little bit thicker, a little bit more optimized for x86, since these devices that are out now, the MacBook 14-inch and the MacBook 16-inch 2021, are obviously built for the M1 Max. And I am not sure if the Intel chips were necessarily built for the Max. I know Intel was trying to make it seem that way, but Apple had a very different incentive to make it as thin as possible. Obviously, now they went a little bit wider with these Pro machines. But if you look at the MacBook Air with the M1, it's absolutely insane. I am sure that if you look at the iMac 24-inch, it's absolutely insane as well. So you see that incentive to make at least the entry-level stuff as thin as humanly possible. They're probably going to try and trim down the MacBooks that are going to come out tomorrow, which is Tuesday, with a next iteration, right? This is just the main goal that Apple has. For some reason, they really like to have their devices thin and as light as possible, and I obviously like that as well. It's not my top priority, like I said before, but it is something that they find to be really, really awesome. Keep in mind that this is their first pro-level chip, right? In a MacBook. So obviously, right now they can't just get to that dream that they want in the future, and they will probably get there because that's what they're fighting for. This is their first chip, and if you look at the sheer power of this first chip in the pro-level, desktop-level realm of computing, it is already so powerful. And obviously a lot of people are saying, right, oh, well, I can build a PC or I can get an Alienware and whatever. I completely understand that, right? And maybe you are ready to carry that extra load on your back, like I am with this MacBook Pro in comparison to the MacBook Pro that came out with the M1. We all have our selective differences, but you have subjective differences and you have objective differences. If we sit in a train and you have an Alienware computer in front of you, I have this MacBook Pro in front of me, I still have the power that I would have in the office. You, on the other hand, although maybe when you're plugged in, you will have more power than I have, right? If you have a 3080, a Core i9, maybe an AMD processor, on the high end, I'm not sure about sustained performance, right? Because, well, you still have a laptop thermal envelope. I'm not sure if you will have that same sustained performance. But yeah, you will have that spike that obviously will move beyond the M1 Max, even with the 32 core GPU. So obviously you will surpass that. The problem is, I will obviously, my curve will flatten a little bit sooner, and your curve will flatten a little bit later. But what happens then is usually your curve just goes down and down and down because x86. Right? Obviously, with a desktop computer, properly cooled desktop computer, you won't have that problem. And obviously, comparing a laptop with a desktop computer is not really necessarily going to be a great thing. But sustained performance, I have seen Razer laptops, the new way thinner Alienware notebooks, thermal throttle. It happens. And then, especially when you don't have your cable, you're fucked. Anyways, I've been blathering on for way too long. Let's just go back to the video.
Couldn't test the new high power mode in macOS Monterey because that's exclusive to the 16-inch model. It basically turns the fans on and lets the temperature ramp up even higher, which is super useful if you're sustaining like a combined CPU and GPU workload for a really, really long time, which is just beyond the thermal envelope of the 14-inch. And you better believe I have an M1 Pro and M1 Max deep dive coming your way and soon. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and bell so you get it first. Now I'll get to unified memory, but I want to talk about the design for a retro chic minute because it feels like that's what I've been calling Apple's current kit since the 2018 iPad Pro. And I feel exactly the same way here. This new MacBook Pro has real old school PowerBook energy, bigger, thicker, more industrial, total pro vibe. And I love it. I legit all caps love it. I am really, really happy that Apple's letting the Pro machines breathe a little bit more again. It comes at the cost of heft, especially on the 16-inch. Forget baby Yodas, but like full-sized Yodas again in our Jedi backpacks. The keyboard is still magic, which I also love. And the black keys are now inset on double black anodized background, which looks awesome, but I worry it'll be lower contrast for people with lower vision, even with the backlights, especially for the Touch ID power button, which gets no backlight, maybe because it would interfere with the sensor, but I'd love to see something there, especially like around the ring. And yeah, RIP touch bar, because the function/media keys, depending on how comp sci you skew, are now full height.
I actually like the touch bar. I'm not sure. I see a lot of people saying this, right? That the touch bar is this, the touch bar is that, but I absolutely love the touch bar. Maybe because I stream. Because you can just, you know, these Elgato stream desks, or whatever it's called, you have these buttons, you can put them on the touch bar as well, which is absolutely insane.
Restored, back
it's
again,
not from Elgato,
but much like the
ports,
I mean. Which I'll get to in a minute, for me personally, it's as much a regression as it is a correction. But you let me know how you feel in the comments. Then there's the notch. DED, dead center, right at the top of the otherwise magnificent new mini LED display.
The whole thing with this notch that I don't really understand is why people see it as taking away space. Since normally this would be entirely black bar. So this whole line would just be black bar. What they did is they pushed up the notification, like whatever this is, the notification bar, and they took about, I don't know, what is this, 15% of that notification bar, 10 to 15%, I'm not sure, and literally gave you all this where normally like the notification bar would be, right, is yours. It's literally the 16:9 aspect ratio starts under the notification bar. So if you put something in full screen, I would imagine if you play World of Warcraft, for example, this would be all black. Like the MacBook Pros that you have right now. It would just turn into bezel, obviously. That's one of the reasons why they picked mini LED, right? So it would be as black as this black right here. So it doesn't really take anything away from you. It is literally giving you all this space, while obviously from all that space that they gave you, they didn't give you 15% of that line. I'm not sure if that is even English, but you know what I mean. So they just gave you the rest. They just didn't give you that. And for some people, it just does not click. They just keep thinking that they took 15% of that notification bar. But that's not the case. They gave you all this space, just not this little part right there. It's the other way around. It's the chicken or the egg, right? And obviously, in this case, we know which one came first. This bar was completely black, not mini LED black. No, it was just a black bar, no screen. They cut down that bar and just took or just left 15% of that little bar there. That's it. I maybe it's just me being crazy, but I don't know.
Which, yes, if Retina High Density was opening the screen door and Cinema Wide Gamut was opening the glass patio door, fully high dynamic range HDR mini LED is like stepping out onto that patio, into the world, just deep blacks, bright whites, vivid colors with tons of contrast and detail everywhere. Basically, almost all the advantages of OLED. Similar sustained brightness levels, better peak brightness levels, without the lack of consistency OLED panels still suffer from at laptop size and Apple scale, but sometimes with haloing around really bright areas on really dark backgrounds. But I feel like that's the right trade-off, at least for now, and it looks absolutely stupendous, especially with the up to 120 Hz adaptive refresh rate. Not just for the ultra high thread count silky smooth scrolling either, which sick. Can look a little motion smooth soap opera at first, but you get used to really quickly. But for the
so you have that on the iPhone. So I do have a lot of you can't see it what I'm pointing at, but I do have a lot of screens that are 120 Hz or above, right? So I'm used to faster refresh rates on computer. Now this is the PC. Let's say the PC kind of corner of my room, the office in my house, and that is mostly for the other business. All my Macs, obviously, right now are using their own displays, apart from one, which is the Mac Mini, which is upstairs in my bedroom, mostly for just doing some random shit, right? You know what I mean? No, it's not. Okay. Anyways, I play WoW on there and stuff like that, right? So I have a ultra-wide display there from LG, and it does everything great. Like, it has a 120 Hz refresh rate. I am just not sure if I ever enabled it, or if I have, like, it doesn't really... I guess what I'm trying to say is, on macOS, it never felt like I needed the extra hertz. Maybe it is going to be something that is going to start with this new MacBook Pro. But the animations are so smooth. Everything in macOS, in my opinion, works so smooth that I don't really need it.
To dynamically ramp down to 24 Hz to save battery life, and also to go to 48 Hz to show and edit 24 frames per second movies the way nature and Hollywood intended. Especially when combined with the new spatial audio speaker system, you've got essentially a high-end Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos theater in your MacBook now. And if you're worried at all about editing at 50 Hz for PAL or CCAM, Apple's kept the manual settings fully operational as well. But yes, that notch. It just gives us way thinner top bezels, which increases the corner to rounded corner size of the display all the way up to 14.2 inches for the smaller model and 16.2 inches for the larger, and just
I really have to stop
pushes the
myself
menu
from
bar
pausing
all the way up off the main display. It just gives us so much more screen real estate for everything that we do. And It costs us nothing but an eyesore that our brain learns to magic eraser. I mean,
there you go.
content-aware fill away within a few hours anyway. My only gripe is that the menu isn't level with the notch.
Well, I've never used
the menu
device,
does change height depending on the screen scaling you set. So if you go off of True Retina, and yes, it is finally True Retina, you still can't make it level. And that means that Apple's HI team thinks it looks better with a tiny LAN bridge at the bottom than it would as two completely separate menu bar islands. But I would just love for them to add a checkbox to set it.
Now, I'm not sure how apparent this is. I saw this, I noticed this, him saying this in the first time I watched this video. I'm not sure how apparent this is. Like, how do people notice it? That's like, I'm not sure. But, yeah, if so, it's a fair point. I would love an option like that.
That says level and pure black. Now, for those of us waiting on Face ID, I think it's going to be a while still, which is disappointing because Apple released Face ID for the iPhone X 5 years ago already. And I figure they still need to keep reducing the z-index of the other components, the infrared dot projector, the flood illuminator, and
Yeah, maybe, but it's also like, I feel like there is, sorry for pausing again, it might also be that on the iPhone, when you're authenticating a payment, or on the iPad Pro, you also just have to make the device known. You have to inform the device that you're paying attention. So it asks you to double tap or double press a button. Now on the Mac, that might feel kind of awkward, so I'm not sure what. Maybe they're trying to do a double authentication for the payments, for example, or whatever, with Touch ID only or whatever. Maybe it's a software thing, maybe it's a security thing, or maybe it's a obviously a tech problem, right? The tech available right now, it doesn't make it happen in something that thin, right? The lid is obviously a little bit thicker, but it's not. Maybe it's not thick enough for this mechanism to be in there.
out how to let us authorize purchases without double clicking the power button, which makes it no more convenient than Touch ID. Or, best of both worlds, Touch ID and Face ID, even if it costs like $100 more. And I've got a whole entire video up explaining way more, and I'll drop a link for that in the description right below the like button. But either way, anyway, I am absolutely here for these displays, including the reference mode. Yes, Apple has totally added reference modes, just like the Pro Display XDR, for anyone color grading or in those types of production workflows. Apple has even turned the old 720p MacBook potato cam into full-on 1080p put-in. And yes, as a Montrealer, there is no higher compliment I can give it. This is the 2021 M1 Max 14-inch MacBook Pro 1080p camera and studio quality mics. This is the microphone and camera on the 2017 15-inch MacBook Pro.
Yay,
This
watch party,
is the
yeah.
2017 iMac Pro
Love
camera
Rene Ritchie
and
for sure,
microphone.
me too.
This is the 2019
he is
16-inch
great,
MacBook
and
Pro
deep dives
camera
are
and
amazing.
microphone.
Yeah, his
This
deep
is
dives.
the new 27-inch iMac
And
1080p camera
and the
and
deep dives
microphone.
are amazing. Yeah,
This is
his
the
deep dives
2020
are insane.
13-inch MacBook Pro camera and
He loves to
microphone.
play with
This
words,
is the
and
M1 13-inch MacBook
and
Pro
I love
720p
when he does
webcam
that. Yeah,
and
me
studio
too. It's
quality
absolutely
microphone.
like,
This is a Logitech
he has a background in
920
marketing.
1080p camera
He
and
knows how to
microphone.
play with words.
This is the Logitech 4K
Here you
Brio
go.
camera
What is that?
and
Apple is
microphone.
love.
This is the 11-inch
Apple
iPad
Silicon
Pro
is love.
front-facing
Apple
camera
Silicon is
and
life.
microphone.
Yeah, true.
This is the 2021
100%
iPhone
loyal
13
to Apple
Pro
Silicon
4K
using
camera
Intel ad
and
voice.
microphones. This is the 2021 M1 Max 14-inch MacBook Pro 1080p camera and studio quality mics. And yes, it doesn't beat a dedicated 4K camera or iPhone, of course, but if you don't have either of those things ready and available, this will finally, the Rock approved, finally, more than make do for you. Now, if you do use an XLR mic, like me, you're still gonna need a dongle. Same if, like me, you use CF Express cards over Thunderbolt rather than SD cards for your camera. Or if your particular layer of enterprise hell still forces you to use DVI or, oh loose, VGA, because pros really never get to live an entirely dongle-free life. It's why I'm super beyond happy that Apple's kept at least 3 now Thunderbolt 4 ports on the MacBook Pro, because I will take as many as I can get. And even though I don't personally use HDMI or SD or high impedance headphones, and as much as I love MagSafe, I also love being able to charge from either side equally as much. I'm also super beyond happy that Apple brought back all of those legacy ports for everyone who still does use them, who still does need and appreciate them, especially on the daily. I just wish they'd thrown Ethernet on the power brick along with it, like the M1 Mac, but none of us every time gets what we wish, including those HDMI and SD cards, ironically, poetically, whatever, because they are less than bleeding edge. They're HDMI 2.0 and UHS 2 respectively,
Yeah, I'm not sure
HDMI
why people are
2.1 and UHS
so upset
3.
about this.
Now, there are 3 Thunderbolt buses up from 2 on the M1 and 3 USB buses, so it's probably just a limitation on how much bandwidth Apple could spend with the M1 Pro and M1 Max,
Yeah,
and how
could
they
be.
chose to spend it between those various ports right now, given how much more, for example, HDMI 2.1 requires, especially considering the MacBook Pro can't push 8K or 120 Hz out yet anyway. But thanks to MagSafe, we do seem to be debuting USB Power Delivery 2.1, which you can fast charge with on the 14-inch MacBook Pro up to 50% in 30 minutes if you get the 96-watt adapter or the 140-watt adapter on the 16-inch. But with this arrangement, I think they're going to make a ton more people happier than they've been in a good half decade. So let's just say it. The M1 Pro and M1 Max MacBook Pros aren't just an utter repudiation of the last half decade of Intel. They are walking back almost
This is very hypnotizing.
all the then future-thinking technologies that the winning group inside Apple hoped would make these truly next-generation MacBooks Pro. The butterfly keyboard is gone. The touch bar is out of here. The all-in on USB-C and Thunderbolt is no longer all-in, and only the Force Touch trackpad remains. That does make it as much a regression as it does a correction, but in this case, for everyone who loved those OG MacBook Pros, it is a massive win, a huge win, an epic victory, but one entirely eclipsed by what Apple's done beyond all of that, namely the XDR display and most especially M1 Pro and M1 Max. And it's hard. It is really hard to wrap your head around it because it's one of those few legitimate, this changes everything moments that we've had in recent history. Honestly, since the second generation MacBook Air, but for very, very different reasons. Apple has just put a 2019 Mac Pro into a 2021 MacBook Pro, complete with everything from reference modes to afterburner acceleration, pretty much everything but the PCIe expansion slots and, the wheels. And that includes up to 64 gigabytes of unified memory,
well, the wheels are still,
feeding not just the
they're
CPU,
still selling the MacBook
but the
Pro,
GPU
still selling
and
the
all
wheels,
the other cores
but,
and IP on the M1 Pro and Max,
was still
which is the level of VRAM you'd max out on a Mac Pro. Not a MacBook Pro, not any laptop, but a full-on Mac Pro. And not only feeding all those up to 32 GPU cores, but just utterly wiping away all the overhead traditional boards accrue, copying data back and forth with SSD that swaps so fast, it's all but indistinguishable from RAM at this point. This is literally the MacBook Pro I've been dreaming of ever since Apple mic dropped the A7 back in 2013 and just loudly proclaimed their silicon intentions to the whole entire world. And what really truly warps my brain here, cliched as it sounds, is that M1 Pro and M1 Max are really only the beginning. Now, I answered a ton more of these types of questions, including how RAM really works in a unified memory world, way more in depth in my explainer. So make sure you check out the extended version of that on Nebula. It's ad-free and sponsor-free, just like all my videos on Nebula, where I have the absolute luxury of posting cuts that aren't optimized for YouTube, but where I just know the nerdiest, the most hardcore of you will love them for that. And it's not just my videos either, but like MKBHD,
I have Nebula,
iPhone
it's
Georgia Dow, Jordan Harris,
like I'm not sponsored,
Gamer, Real Science,
but
Ali
I don't
Abdal,
care.
EPOS Vox, and so many more, all ad-free, sponsor-free on Nebula, and bundled in for free when you sign up with today's sponsor at curiositystream.com/Rene Ritchie or click the link below.
You get that.
And
you
right
get that
now,
for free as well.
Because
like
you're watching this video,
or maybe the
you
other
can
way around.
get
But
CuriosityStream for
it's absolutely
26% off, less than
really
$15 a year, less than the price of a MacBook Pro dongle for a whole entire year. And that includes their thousands of amazing documentaries and series like Beyond the Spotlight, which this week focuses on Jimmy Donaldson, aka Mr. Beast, the world's first digital philanthropist, who, after becoming absolutely obsessed with YouTube at a very young age, built a viral video empire based on the joy he gets from helping others, including, honestly, me, and who you might see here on this very channel pretty damn soon, actually.
Hey, Rene.
I know. Huge tease. But it's the best way to support educational creators directly and the best damn deal in streaming today. So for over 26% off CuriosityStream, less than $15 a year, and Nebula bundled in for free, just click the button on the screen or go to curiositystream.com/Rene Ritchie. Clicking on that button really helps out the channel, and so does hitting up the playlist above for way more on M1 Pro, M1 Max, and the new MacBook Pro. Just hit up the playlist, and I'll see you in the next video.
That comparison is not what that comparison is so good and amazing. The difference working with Progress makes, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. Performance of the M1 Max is incredible. Looking forward to see the interview with you and Mr. Beast. Yeah, me too. We might make a watch party out of that as well. I'm not sure, like, we're a small channel, so maybe we can pull that off. Obviously, if we grow, at some point it will be a little bit weird to keep doing this. But for now, I feel like people won't even notice, so. Still impressed with the, wait, what? Still impressed with them M1 numbers versus i9. Yeah, that is absolutely insane. Even the M1 outperforms the i9. Obviously an older i9, but like literally insane. Totally confident that the M1 Pro handling my workflow with ease. Yeah, for sure, most workflows, the M1 is enough. Thanks for the numbers, excellent video. Yeah, these numbers that you got, you can actually calculate a lot of stuff with them. If you're trying to check if you should get one of them, like obviously the M1 Pro will be somewhere in between those numbers, so you will be Gucci. You will be Gucci. So I'm looking at the time because we have a lot to discuss still. So let's just move on from this subject a little bit, right?